Hello everyone, how's it going? Hope you're having a wonderful day. So Dead Space Remake launched last year and it was a major success. Lots of people who love the Dead Space IP thought this was a faithful remake of the original game. It maintained the same presentation, tone, and atmosphere that the original game launched with. It didn't trample on anything that the original game established. Granted, they did shift the personalities for some of the characters to be more complicated than just one note, and that has mixed reception among the gamers, but for the most part, I personally loved it as a longtime Dead Space fan who 100%ed every Dead Space entry. I thought this was a spectacular remake. And after the game launched, EA launched surveys that showcased whether people would be interested in a Dead Space 2 remake. And this is kind of the rage nowadays. Capcom kind of popularized this with their Resident Evil remakes. And I'm open to a Dead Space 2 remake. I still think Dead Space 2 holds up to this day. Even Dead Space 1 does. But, I'm not opposed to an idea of a remake, especially considering how successful Dead Space 1's remake was. But since Battlefield 2042 has ended major support for the game, Season 7 being the final installment of updates for the game in terms of major installments, Motive, who was responsible for Dead Space Remake, have moved to becoming a major staple within the Battlefield franchise and moving forward with their Iron Man game. Now, a lot of people started becoming worried about Dead Space's future because EA already killed the franchise once. Granted, it was on them with Dead Space 3 having unrealistic expectations and them constantly, micromanaging the game to be more like Call of Duty rather than being Dead Space. But yeah, there were rumors surfacing yesterday that Dead Space 2 was in development and cancelled. Now, since those rumors went live with Jeff Grubb heading the charge about this, during the latest episode of Game Mess Mornings, Jeff Grubb spoke about the announcement of Motive being moved over to Battlefield franchise by EA. During the segment, he talked about what was meant for Dead Space 2 remake from the studio. Granted, this has not been announced. EA and Motive have never confirmed that Dead Space 2 have been in development. Motive said that they were going to be a two-project team going forward, and that it was going to be Iron Man and Battlefield. So yeah, this basically just, put fuel on the fire. He continued they were working on Dead Space 2, and they are no longer working on it. It is on the shelf because the first game had lackluster sales, so if you're looking forward to a Dead Space 2, it's bad news. It's straight up bad news. Now, I tried to look up sales for Dead Space 1. There are a lot of people putting it out there that Dead Space 1 only sold around 2 million copies, which is a healthy amount, but EA has had very unhealthy expectations with their single-player games. Not to mention, I've read along the lines that the Callisto Protocol did better in the UK in terms of box sales, but we all saw what happened with that game. It eventually just flopped hard, and the game also was reported that it didn't do well despite, top in sales charts. But in terms of Dead Space, I would argue that it did better in the long run. I fully believe that when Halloween came around that a lot of people did purchase the game. That's how Resident Evil makes a large portion of its revenue through sales during Halloween. But since then, EA just flat out came out and said this is completely BS. So update, EA is denying the claim by Jeff Grubb that Dead Space 2 Remake was cancelled so that the team at EA Motive can work on Battlefield. We don't normally comment on rumors, but there is no validity to this story. You rarely see companies come out and just say this stuff. They usually give some PR statement saying we don't comment on rumors, we have no say in this. So the fact they just came out and stated this is pretty drastic. It's just like saying, nope, it's not true. We have no idea where this news is coming from. I think it also creates a lot of adversity among the company because Dead Space is a very popular IP, and like I stated, the game was very well received among the fan base. So this probably would have created a lot of issues with EA stating, oh, we're canceling Dead Space again. It would have been a huge hurt to their PR reputation. I know that's like an oxymoron considering it's EA, but nevertheless, I also think it would have caused a lot more issues than it would have been positive if they just allowed this rumor to sit. And the EA spokesperson told IGN, even IGN's Kate Bailey said that her sources told her a Dead Space 2 remake was never considered. I mean, considering they sent out a survey, I don't know how much about that, but it could be conflicting reports among developers and sources when it comes to upper management. We've seen that time and time again where upper management doesn't really give the full details of what could be the future of certain projects and IPs. But nevertheless, he doubled down on the report. I gave you my permission to believe EA if you want, but whenever a company says that isn't true, but they don't specify which part of the story they are talking about, well, yeah, Dead Space 2 is definitely being planned. It had a code name, and they aren't making it now. Now, the entire possibility to this is that they are making it, and they're trying to keep it as low-key as possible. Maybe it's a misdirection. That's also possible. I know I have false hope when it comes to the Dead Space IP, but it could be just false hope. The other thing is that they could have just been flat out said this is not true, and the people they're talking to probably think that it's not happening because they probably moved to other projects, maybe Battlefield and the new Iron Man game. Or maybe that they're just in the starter stages of Dead Space 2 and they're working fully on the other games that EA wants them to work on, like Battlefield and Iron Man. Until those are done, they're not going to focus on Dead Space. Like, even though Dead Space is a very popular IP, it's minuscule compared to Marvel and Battlefield. So maybe that's the whole situation. They're going to wait and see whether there is a good time to release a horror game at the moment, because right now Capcom has that market cornered with the Resident Evil franchise. A lot of people have mixed receptions with Silent Hill, so they probably think that the market is too saturated at the moment to release a Dead Space game, which I would be against that. But, you know, it is EA and they want to focus on what makes the most money. But tell me what you think. That's it for me. Bye.